I, hello. Good morning, everybody. Can't see me behind these mics, but it's nice to see you. I am Mayor Sherry Cantor, and it is a pleasure for me to be here today for the 23rd annual celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He would have been 90 if he had lived today on January 15th. Please give a round of applause to the Hall High Jazz Combo. I would like to introduce these talented musicians. We have Brennan Ravenberg on guitar, Seth Hay Smith on bass, Toby Siegel on drums. Toby played in my son's band when he was 7, I think. Jason Hoops on piano, Ryan Venora on trumpet, Eli Heenan on trombone, Adam Smith on bari sax, Noah Yontef and Maytag on tenor sax, and Jacob Dembo on trombone. Their music director is James Antonucci. So again, give them a round of applause, very talented. The jazz combos at each of our high schools alternate performances at this annual special event. The Hall Jazz Combo is a student-run group that performed throughout the Hartford area. Over the past few years, they have had the opportunity to perform in Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and Italy, while on Euro tours and in Boston at the Berkeley Jazz Festival. They arrange music for their combo as well as play jazz standards with their own flair. And we are grateful that they could be here to welcome us this morning. For 23 years, West Hartford has been remembering the life and the legacy of Dr. King, a spiritual leader who changed the course of American history. One second, I have to turn over. Since 1997, more than 1,000 West Hartford Public School children have participated in this event with their school choirs, jazz bands, and speakers. Today's celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's life is the result of a dedicated group of people who meet throughout the year. They are Natalie Mendez of West Hartford African American Social and Cultural Organization, Judy Wyman of the West Hartford Human Rights Commission, Town Historian Tracy Wilson, Tammy Exum, Paul Vasinis, Marianne Hall of West Hartford Public Schools, and Renee McHugh, this could never happen without Renee, of the Town of West Hartford. A special thanks also goes to WHCTV, West Hartford Community Television, for airing this event live so people don't have to enter in the cold. My 90-year-old mother, who would not leave the house this morning, can watch it on TV, and the Elmwood Senior Center for providing refreshments. I would also like to acknowledge some officials that are here to join us today. From the Town Council, we have Ben Winograd and Lam Sweeney. We also have probate, we can wait for applause until the end, that would be great. Probate Judge Owen Egan. We have Superintendent Tom Moore, Board of Education Deb Pullen, Representative Slapp, Representative Wilson Pheanious, who is a speaker here. And from town staff, we have Town Manager Matt Hart, as well as the Superintendent. Anybody else I miss? Oh my gosh, and our new state treasurer, Sean Wooden. I apologize. Yeah, now you can applaud. I would also like to welcome Rabbi Kessler. I know he's in the audience here, who has been a champion for human rights and actually spent time with Dr. Martin Luther King when he was in the Hartford area. He really is a champion, and last year I actually spoke a lot about Rabbi Kessler. If you have the opportunity, I think he's in the back. Rabbi Kessler, can you raise your hand? He really, again, is a champion and a fabulous historian and understands so much about human rights and the importance of the movement, the civil rights movement. We come together today, and I'm speaking to the choir here. This is really, you've come here to enrich your souls and be inspired to be better, more understanding, more welcoming, and to make our community a more beloved community. I want to thank you all for being here again in this very, very cold morning. I know that there will be a lot of warmth and inspiring words spoken today. Thank you for not just hearing, but actively listening to our inspirational speakers. It really is an act of generosity and discovery when we listen deeply. As Dr. King said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I'm sure today you will not hear silence about things that matter. I also, as a volunteer mayor, our town is enriched by so many volunteers. And at this moment, Dr. King also said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? In celebration and honor of Dr. King's legacy, commit to volunteer, commit to helping each other. Enjoy this glorious celebration and enjoy your day. And again, thank you for being with us. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's MC, Henley Solomon Jr. He may look familiar because he gave the Student Perspective speech in 2014. How cool is that? Henley graduated from Conrad High School in 2015 and is currently a senior at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. He will graduate this May a double major in English and Theater Arts and Education program. Henley is the Fundraising and Philanthropy Chair for Pi Omega Chapter of Kappa Sigma Fraternity, and through his efforts raised $7,500 for the Military Heroes Campaign that provides veterans in Bridgeport with health care and housing. In 2016, representing the Open Choice program, Henley went to Washington, D.C. to give his perspective on school integration in a TED Talk at the U.S. Department of Education. Henley's passions are music and theater arts, teaching, and mentorship. He was featured on the October cover of Dramatics magazine and was nominated by Connecticut Broadway World Awards for Best Leading Actor in a Musical. Please give a warm welcome to Henley Solomon Jr.
Hello, thank you, and good morning. And welcome to the MLK celebration on this cold, -3-degree weather. Thank you for coming out. I just want to take a moment just to give thanks and honor, where honor is due to Miss Renee McHugh and to her lovely staff for planning this wonderful event. And give it up for her, please. It is an honor and a privilege to be back here again. I'd also like to take the moment to salute every teacher, administration, Board of Ed, custodian, janitor, doctor, lawyer, firefighter, policeman, EMT, coach, and everyone here. Because if it wasn't for you, West Hartford would not be the town that it is without you. Without your hard work and devotion, we are West Hartford. Diverse in cultures and ethnicities, languages, and ideas, in spite of our diversity, one thing that is evident is that's evident to the eye and to our nation, that we all come together under the united theme of education. West Hartford puts their students first. And being an open choice student and a product of the West Hartford schools, I have experienced firsthand the benefits of the positive outcomes of a public school education here in West Hartford. I mean, come on, we are not in the top percent for a reason, people. This town is a true testament of how diversity means unity, and diversity does not mean the lack of unity. Dr. Wilson, I might say that we are truly, as John Winthrop would say, a city on a hill. So can you give it up for you guys? Yes. And without further ado, let's start our program. From year to year, the MLK committee thoughtfully selects a member from a different faith community to give the opening prayer. This year, we are fortunate to have Rabbi James Rosen of Bethel Temple in West Hartford. Rabbi Jim Rosen has been the rabbi of Bethel since 1992. He has brought to Bethel Temple a broad array of programs and learning opportunities designed to reach families and individuals of all ages and backgrounds. He has provided the vision to create a caring Jewish community of excellence that is inviting and warm to all. Rabbi Rosen has been sought after as a speaker and writer extensively in the areas of disability in Judaism, conversion, and contemporary interpretation of classic texts. Approachable and eager to meet and learn from all, he is also an avid runner who hopes his needs will last far into the future. Please stand for the prayer and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you so very much. One of the scriptural passages favored by Reverend King was that beautiful, vivid call that the prophet Amos uttered. Let justice flow like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. But it is cold, friends, too cold for much of anything to flow this day. Or at least it feels that way beyond the weather as well, as we find ourselves so often frozen in a morass of hate and posturing and the false but comfortable assumption of just who we are and who the other is. My prayer for us this morning is based, though in a different verse, one that for me describes why I hope we are here, one that captures the great gift of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And so we say, Sovereign God who delights in justice, help us all to know the power and hope in that marvelous verse of the Psalms that reads, Light is sown for the righteous and for the upright in heart. Thank you for the life and teaching, the courage, the vision, the tenacity of Dr. Martin Luther King. For he was one who embodied your promise. He planted seeds of righteousness and nurtured them throughout his life with love. Help us, God, to do the same. Help us to keep alive the light and the hope from one who spoke of a dream and lived it, one who formed and fanned the flame of goodness and daring to imagine a time when the descendants of slaves might link arms with former slave owners in a common humanity, when all might have the faith, as he said at one time, to take the first step, even when you can't see the whole staircase. Dr. King planted righteousness in our midst. Help us, Eternal One, to live by its glow, to know its warmth, and to make it a blazing tribute to the best within us all. Amen.
And now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may not be all seated. Each year, one student from each of the high schools is selected to deliver the student perspective on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Selection is based on classroom observations, writing samples, and interviews with the department supervisor. The two students who were chosen are Brianna Bobo of Conard High School and Michael Lovo of Hall High School. Brianna Bobo, please come forward. Please give it up.
Good morning. We are gathered here today to celebrate a legend, a hero, and an extraordinary individual, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Many of us may know him as the man we celebrate annually who gives us a day off from work or school, or the man behind the civil rights movement, or maybe the voice that proclaimed this famous line, I have a dream, that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Although these are all important depictions of King, we fail to remember that he was also a loving husband, devoted father, a faithful man of God, and most importantly, a man who simply sought change in society. Before I begin my message, I would like to give you some background on myself. I am a history geek, and I'm proud of it. So when my teacher first introduced this awesome opportunity to me, I was like, yes, I knew exactly what I was going to say. While he was talking about the important details, in my mind, I was already at the end of my speech with a standing ovation. But as soon as I began to write, my mind went blank. I realized that the name King is familiar, but the man King is more complex. It took weeks just for me to come up with an opening. After all my brainstorming exercises, and trust me, I tried them all, write down all the bad ones, fish out the good ones. I even typed into Google words to describe King. You name it, I did it. At the end of all of this, I noticed that one word kept coming up: leader. So being the person that I am, I thought about what it meant to be a leader. In thinking, I realized that King wasn't just a leader. He didn't just redirect a nation, he redefined it. Daniel Goleman, an author and science journalist, once said, "Being an effective leader requires constant focus, perseverance, and building a team that is accountable and designed to get results." These three characteristics position King for success. For the short time we have left, I would like to elaborate upon these three ideas. Step one, focus. Someone once told me, when life gets blurry, adjust your focus. King expressed this idea throughout his trials and tribulations. He saw a problem and decided to create a solution rather than adding to the problem. At a young age, King was introduced to the American dream, the potential to have a fabulous job, a loving family, and the opportunity to become the president. When imposing this philosophy, the writer forgot to mention one thing. If you were Black, you will have to face limitations when trying to achieve this goal, or simply that this idea does not affect you. Growing up, King witnessed men and women who looked like him be discriminated against, murdered, and denied their freedoms because of the complexion of their skin. King didn't perceive the circumstance as a dead end, but rather a new challenge to conquer. Although he was one man, he knew that there was something that could be done. With faith, dedication, and hard work, anything is possible. When life seems blurry or hard to understand, he adjusts his focus. He took the first step by creating a goal. He referred to it as the gospel of freedom. According to the Tolerance Project, King's objective was to raise public consciousness of racism and end racial discrimination and segregation in the United States. King had a vision. He was going to make a difference. Despite of the uproar of the times, King decided it was time for change. As Maya Angelou once said, "If you don't like something, change it." In agreement with Angelou's statement, King said in his last sermon, "The time is always right to do the right thing." Remember, to be a true leader, you have to decide to create change rather than waiting for the clock to run out. Step two, perseverance. Like I mentioned before, I like to Google things, so I Googled perseverance. According to Google, perseverance is the steady persistence of a course of actions, a purpose, a state, especially in spite of difficulties, obstacles, or discouragement. What stood out to me most was the fact to be able to be continually to act with purpose despite of the trials of your faith. It is easy to be steadfast when everything is going as planned, but a true leader is developed when times are tough. Like King said in his book, Strengthened to Love, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Let me paint the picture. Where you're not the first one to be picked for a team or a group at school, or when you're being overlooked for a position at work. There's something inside of you that ignites you to take the next step. A former Speaker of a House once said, or he described perseverance as the hard work you do after getting tired of doing the hard work you already did. Perseverance is an ongoing thing. It's not just a one-time choice. It's making that choice over and over and over and over until it becomes a habit. King had a tough war to fight. He was up against the institution of America, racism. He tried to break down a stronghold that was installed over 300 years before he was even born. Don't get me wrong, King didn't walk into this situation blindfolded like Sandra Bullock in Bird Box. But he knew that he was going to have to make great sacrifices because nothing worth having comes easy. He took an act of faith by believing that a young pastor would shift a nation. King further explained this concept in his I Have a Dream speech, expanding on Hebrews 11:1. Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. To add, even if there are obstacles in the way, you still have to take the first step. An effective leader means that you have to be patient and steadfast until you receive results. Step 3, building a right team. My question for you is, who's on your team? We all have heard this saying, the birds of the feather flock together. Although this may be a cliche, this statement holds weight. We as individuals are the sum of the people we hang with throughout the day. Their personalities, habits, and words becomes one with our subconscious. Have you ever found yourself sounding like your parents or your friends? We have to be aware that who is in our circle or who we tell our vision to. Growing up, my grandfather always told me misery loves company, meaning that those who are not productive try to bring down the ones who are. For King, he kept the best of the best around him at all times. Anyone who knew King knew that if King was around, Ralph Abernathy and Jesse Jackson were too. These are just a couple of King's closest friends. All these people are supportive, trustworthy, and understood King's vision. King separated himself from negativity and surrounded himself with those who had his best interests at heart. King said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Remember to choose your friends wisely." In closing, King sacrificed his life so that we can live ours. It's time for us to pick up the baton and to continue where he left off. We have came a long way, and we have a long way to go. It's time for us to rise up and be the leaders that we need to be. Maya Angelou said, "I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Our actions speak louder than our words. It's time for us to stop talking about change and be the change we seek. Edward Everett Hale, an American author and minister, once said, "I am only one man, but I am still one." Take a look around this room. Make sure to look at your neighbors. Look around. If we all do our part, we will be unstoppable and powerful. Simply, if you see something wrong, do something rather than turn from it. When you see yourself fall off course, remember why you started. We are all leaders of our own lives. Have a vision and start working towards it. We have to take one step of faith at a time. Keep asking yourself, how do I focus on my goals? How can I persevere? Who's on my team? And remember this, a final note from King. If you can't fly, then run. And if you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Thank you.
Yes. Fantastic job. Very profound words. Brianna, and you are certainly a great leader in the making. Yes. And now we'll hear from Mika Lovell of Hall High School. Please welcome her.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by saying I am very honored and grateful to be chosen to give a speech today. And I have to say, at first I was very nervous to accept this honor because, as you can see, I am white. But I had a realization when I thought about the recent conflict within the NFL and the movement of players kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality. And I thought about how I was waiting for the white players to begin kneeling alongside their teammates, but those players were few and far between. People who are marginalized, discriminated against, or treated unfairly for any reason shouldn't have to defend their rights and stand up to equality by themselves, because it's 2019, and now is the time that everyone can join the Black Lives Matter movement, and anyone can go to the Women's March, and everyone is welcome at March for Our Lives, and anyone can join the Me Too movement. People are standing up for their values and beliefs, not because every controversy affects them specifically, and not because these issues hurt them, but because they know that certain treatment of particular marginalized groups is simply not just. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." This quote means a lot to me, especially when thinking about today's society. He has taught me that when you believe in something, you must stand up for it, proudly, because it does no good for anyone to just think about something important. I have learned that I must speak out when I see unfairness in the world, or even at my own high school, because change does not come from silence. Change comes from strong voices, with powerful words and action, and change is the only thing that keeps us moving forwards. Part of Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy is his work in the civil rights movement using nonviolent protests and boycotts to stop segregation and discrimination. Now, more than ever, so many citizens are living the way that Martin Luther King Jr. wanted us to live, never staying silent about the things that matter. We are marching, we are kneeling, we are rallying, we are voting, we are tweeting, and we are banding together for our cause. People are saying Me Too, highlighting sexual assault worldwide, supporting each other, and trying to live by the values that Martin Luther King Jr. taught Americans and instilled in us. Today's activists are very like Martin Luther King Jr. For example, in 2018, people boycotted the Ingram Angle TV show on Fox News because Laura Ingram, its host, was extremely disrespectful to Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg. Laura Ingram shared an article on Twitter titled, "Gun Rights Provocateur David Hogg Rejected by 4 Colleges to Which He Applied." She added, and whines about it, "Dinged by UCLA with a 4.1 GPA, totally predictable given acceptance rates." Hogg responded by posting on Twitter a list of all of the advertisement sponsors for Ingram's show and called a boycott for them. Eventually, 8 of the companies said they will be removing their advertisements from her show. This recent situation is similar to the Montgomery bus boycott, where Black Americans in the city refused to use public transportation until the discrimination aimed at them, forcing them to sit in the back of the bus, was deemed illegal with real consequences. In 2017, 2018, and 2019, there were the Women's Marches and March for Our Lives, which mirror Dr. King's March on Washington for Jobs and Freedoms, where he gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. In all of these marches, there was a common goal: more freedom and equality for various groups living in the United States. His legacy lives on today through activists that he inspired to speak out and spark change using peaceful demonstrations. Americans today speak out when it feels like no one wants to hear our voices. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I came to the conclusion that there is an existential moment in your life where you must decide to speak for yourself. Nobody else can speak for you." Civil rights activism and anti-segregation movements were not commonplace in the 1950s and 60s. Police, and the justice system actively tried to silence them, but these activists were brave, served jail time, experienced attacks from police officers, and still, high-pressure hoses did not stop them because they knew that their message was more important than any attempt to silence them. Dr. King and all civil rights activists' legacy is their bravery because they stood proudly with their cause and did not let fear stand in their way. Robert Frost, in the poem "The Road Not Taken," said, "Somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood. And I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." I think this is an important message because sometimes the right thing to do can be the hardest, just like the actions of civil rights activists. Similarly, one of the most important things Dr. King taught me is that my opinion may not be the one I hear around me most often, and that an unpopular idea is just the start of a new movement. The inequality and racism that was present in the 1950s and 60s that Dr. King fought against is seen as a disgrace by the vast majorities of Americans in the United States today. Although we have made so much progress, I think it is important to look and see how much our society urgently needs to change to reach our highest potential. I hope that in the future, we will look back on the inequality in our lives and see it as a disgrace to our history, the same way we view segregation and discrimination in the 1950s and 60s. I hope that later in life, we can look back and be appalled that white supremacy is still present in 2019, that there are still hate crimes and anti-Semitism, that Latina and Hispanic women make 53 cents to every white man's dollar, and that someone who is Black is 7 times more likely to be incarcerated than someone who is white. I think it should be seen as an urgent issue that people are still discriminated against for race, religion, gender, disability, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and for infinitely more reasons. It seems to me that now more than ever, we need someone like Martin Luther King Jr. to speak out and make change in society. We have come so far, and yet it seems like history is repeating itself. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle." We need to act because Martin Luther King Jr. is not here to change the world a second time. He cannot fight the millions of battles that Americans fight every day. Martin Luther King Jr. created change that will be remembered in this country forever, and he has paved the way for new activists. And now is the time. Now more than ever is the time for every person to become an activist because there is so much to be done. And that is what Martin Luther King Jr. taught me. I have learned that we are on a continuous journey towards equality and that change is the only thing that keeps us moving forwards. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So I hope that everyone can learn something from Dr. King and never let your voice be silenced again. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for Brianna and Mika. Give another applause. Yes, please. Yes. And might I add that these two young women are an example of the positive outcome that our school system is producing. Strong leaders, strong leaders. And you too, we have hope because we have young women like yourselves in our schools. Here on behalf of the state, we have State Treasurer Sean Wooden, who would like to recognize Brianna and Mika for their messages to the community today. And as you leave the town hall today, take note of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. plaque that hangs on the wall in the lobby near the elevators. It contains the names of the students that delivered a speech on this holiday since 1997. And now we'll have State Treasurer Sean Wooden.
Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge the town of West Hartford. Thank you for hosting this every year. Dr. King, his legacy, his history, we celebrate him. But now, what's happening in this country, now, more than ever, we need to lift up his memory and continue to reiterate his call to action. And there are 3 points, and we see it in Mika and Brianna. That was beautiful, that was powerful. I feel like the rest of us should just clap and say, okay, program over, right? But there are 3 things, and I had the opportunity to spend a day with Martin Luther King III a few months ago. And so we got to talk a lot. Right, and there are 3 things that I'd like to emphasize. One is love. Dr. King and his message was about love, right? And right now in this country, given all the hate that we see, on social media, on television, what's happening in Washington, we need to remember that message of love because that is core and foundational to Dr. King. The other, which both of you talked about so eloquently, is courage. Courage. Change doesn't happen. I'm not standing here because no one in our society had courage. I'm standing here because a lot of people did. And I'm mindful of that. And clearly, I've always said change typically comes from young people. Dr. King was very young when he got started, and so were so many others. And your message it resonates with me, and it shows courage. The last thing is hope. Even in our darkest hours, in our darkest moments, and I, just being honest, some days I wake up or I see a Donald Trump tweet, I feel like we're there, right? But, as Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And I want to leave you with that message of hope. If we continue to remember Dr. King, to lift him up, and to consider his words and his history as a continual call to action, our country, our state, our community in West Hartford. We have hope, and we will be good. Thank you.
And I'm going to deviate from the program a little bit. It seems that our Senator Blumenthal had stopped in, and I would like him to come up and just welcome the crowd for a bit. So can you please welcome Senator Blumenthal?
Thank you so much. I'm proud and excited and grateful to be here today. I don't know why Sean doesn't like Donald Trump's tweets. I can't explain it, but I want to first and foremost thank Mayor Cantor, the town of West Hartford, for reminding us what's important about this day, what's important about America, what's important about being an American. A lot of people have taken the day off. For anybody interested in social justice, today is a day on. Not to mourn, not to regret, not to give up, but to celebrate. Celebrate young people who are here and the world that is going to improve because of them. Celebrate that arc of history, which Martin Luther King said was long, but it does bend toward justice. And we know, and if there is one animating principle that we need to keep in mind in our lifetimes, it is when there is injustice anywhere, there is injustice everywhere. So we are, right now, the greatest nation in the history of the world. We don't have to make America great again. We are a great nation. We don't have to build walls. Martin Luther King was about building bridges. He was about bringing us together, black and white, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of background, regardless of economics. He was about bringing America together in a common cause, building bridges, not walls. And he won the Nobel Prize for peace, but he was a fighter for justice. So let's celebrate this day on by continuing the fight for justice in our country and keeping alive that dream, a dream that should be one that every one of us can hold out and live up to and keep fighting for. Thank you to West Hartford. Thank you to all of you for being here today. God bless you. God bless our great nation. Thank you.
Yes, could you please stand to our feet and applaud our senator? Yes. Senator Blumenthal, we just want to thank you for the work you've done for our state, and also want to personally thank you for the work you do for education. We want to thank you very much. And now we have the pleasure of hearing from the KP Singers, a great group from King Philip Middle School. Yes, give it up for KP. As they get ready, I'm going to give you a brief introduction and a little background to the KP Singers. They're an auditioned choir of 7th and 8th graders at King Philip Middle School. The ensemble sings music from a wide variety of genres, and they perform a number of times throughout the year, both at KP and throughout the community. Today, they will be singing Shed a Little Light by James Taylor under the direction of choir director Brian Pia. Please welcome the KP Singers. beautiful, beautiful, beautiful voices. Shed a little light. I love that line. I can't get life from $1. I can't get life from a TV screen. Thank you, KP Singers, for that wonderful performance. Now I'm pleased to welcome Donna Capps Evans, who will tell us about our keynote speaker. Ms. Cap Evans is a West Hartford resident and member of the West Hartford African American Social and Cultural Organization and a sponsor for this event. Please welcome Ms. Evans.
Good morning. This year's keynote speaker is Patricia Wilson Pheanious. She is the first African American woman to win a rural legislative seat in Connecticut. Retired after a career of nearly 4 decades working in the state, including as commissioner of the Department of Social Services and as a teacher at 4 colleges, Pheanious decided to return to public service. Returned to public service by running for office. In November 2018, she was elected to represent the Quiet Corner of Wellington. Her primary concerns for her district are the deteriorating infrastructure of homes and public buildings, raising the minimum wage, and maintaining quality education. Wilson Pheanious is the daughter of a Tuskegee Airman who she says shaped dedication to public service. She is proud of ancestry newly discovered through the Witness Stones Project and of her success as a single parent. Now, with the start of a new legislative year upon us, Representative Patricia Wilson Pheanious plans to use her experience. She is ready to get to work and to let her voice be heard. Please give her a warm welcome, Patricia Wilson Pheanious.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. I am really honored today. Excuse me. You know, I've got some water in my bag. Could you hand it to me? I can tell I'm going to need it already. Might as well get ready for it. There it comes. Thank you. See, I come prepared. I am honored to speak today of Dr. Martin Luther King to celebrate his legacy. And frankly, I long for his wisdom and his leadership in these very difficult times. We celebrate Dr. King because he guided America out of the darkness and toward a precious dream. We are that dream. I stand here today as evidence of the realization of a part of that dream. I am old enough to truly appreciate the legacy. I was raised in Connecticut, not in the Deep South, but I knew full well that there were places in this country where I was not welcomed, where I could not go. And there were rights that I should have been given at birth. I simply wasn't free to enjoy them from the beginning. Rights are something that we sometimes take for granted. The right to vote, the right to equal protection under the law, the right to an equal education, the right to equal public accommodations and freedoms when we travel. I was a child of the North through all the years of the Civil Rights Movement, and I knew even then that in the South there were children who were fighting for their lives. To some in the audience, the times I reflect on must seem like ancient history. My own grandchildren are 7 and 13, and when I talk to them about civil rights sometimes, they sort of treat me like I'm talking about something from the ancient past, something from the forgotten old days. Slavery, the Civil War, World War II, Vietnam. Those are things sometimes that get past them a bit. The pain of the past seems a distant memory, but sadly, it is an ancient history. Frankly, I'm not that old. I have to say that the fight did not happen so very long ago, and the battle is definitely not over. To ignore or forget our history in America could doom us to repeat it. We don't ever want to forget why we celebrate Dr. King. He gave his life to help our country regain its conscience. Martin Luther King inspired us. He taught, he motivated, he fought for and struggled with us. He helped people find a voice, showing them how much more they were alike than different. He was a charismatic spellbinder who brought people together through faith. Martin Luther King, after all, was a preacher. He was the son of a Baptist minister. A dedicated husband and father of 4, he became a social activist. MLK was an orator whose leadership was fundamental to the American Civil Rights Movement and to ending legal segregation in America. We forget sometimes about how Dr. King suffered ridicule in his day. He was viewed by some as a controversial, possibly dangerous, pro-labor activist. He was a vocal revolutionary that disarmed enemies with the power of love and nonviolent political action. Did you know that Martin King started college when he was only 15? It was 1944 when he entered Morehouse College. That summer, he was one of hundreds of students that traveled north by train to work in Connecticut shade tobacco fields. The men who used to work in them had gone to war. And so these students came up from the South because there was good money in tobacco at that time. Now, having grown up in the Deep South, it was on this trip to Simsbury, Connecticut, that Dr. King first had the opportunity to watch Black men and white men live, work, and worship together in harmony. The experience made a lasting impression that he carried back to the South. So Dr. King's dream really started just a little ways from here, not far from where you sit. Now imagine, if you can, what it was like when Dr. King began to dream. He started laying the foundation for his dream in the early 50s. I was 2 years old in 1952, and that was the first year since 1881 that nobody in America was lynched. When I was 4 years old, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Brown v. Board of Education to end segregation in public schools. I started kindergarten when Emmett Till was brutally murdered in Mississippi. My mother hid the pictures away from me because they just weren't appropriate for a 5-year-old to see. There were pictures in Jet magazine. The horror of his open casket was scary to everybody, and she didn't want her little girl to see. But I snuck when nobody was looking, and I took a look, and it did scare me. It terrified me. Some months later, I remember overhearing my mom and my aunt talking in the kitchen with proud but somewhat hushed voices about the day Rosa Parks sat down on a bus in a seat in the white section. She refused to move when asked because she was tired and because she had just had enough. She was through waiting. We cheered for those that were involved in the bus boycotts that followed. I entered Ashford Elementary School in the 2nd grade, and Dr. King was a graduate school then, studying the revolutionary, nonviolent, resistant techniques of Mahatma Gandhi. It wasn't long before Dr. King founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and it was in that organization that Dr. King launched the nonviolent approach to political action. I was 10 when students, excited by the writings from his first book, began to sit in segregated lunch counters in the South. Their silent, peaceful protests were met with humiliation and aggression. I was 11 when the Freedom Riders, black and white, rode to desegregate public transportation. I remember watching the horrible aftermath of the fire bombings and the beatings that resulted. I was 12 when James Meredith fought his way into Ole Miss, and 13 when NAACP leader Medgar Evers was assassinated in front of his home and in front of his children. A lot happened that year. There were almost 400,000 protesters who marched on Washington and brought national publicity to the movement. 4 little black girls were killed in a bombing in a church in Birmingham that summer. And I remember when they arrested the man who was carrying dynamite, they charged him with illegal possession of a firearm, not with murder. I watched TV from the safety of my home, while in Birmingham, school kids my age with ankle socks and bows in their hair were attacked by police dogs and deliberately rolled down the street by firemen with powerful fire hoses. I remember that the children sang songs of protest, and I remember that they didn't run. I was 14 when the 3 civil rights workers were murdered in Alabama, and the world seemed to go up in flames that year. There were riots in Harlem, Chicago, Rochester, and Philadelphia. President Johnson took the opportunity to move the Civil Rights Act through Congress. And that year, a young Dr. King received the Nobel Peace Prize. At 15, I favored Malcolm X, another great leader. He was charismatic and handsome and single and intelligent and well-spoken and a strong black man, much like Dr. King. But unlike Dr. King, Malcolm advocated getting justice now by any means necessary. He was assassinated later that year. In my 15th year, I also saw the Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery. There was bloodshed on the William Pettus Bridge. Riots followed in Watts, and 34 Americans were killed. Then the Voting Rights Act passed Congress, and for the first time in our history, it became illegal to restrict any citizen from the right to vote. I was 16 when Stokely Carmichael launched a new concept, Black Power. James Brown followed, and we raised our voices in a chorus of Black pride. Say it loud. We were black, and we were proud. Black people own the power in our color, in our afros, in our unique music and dress, in our culture. Black people recognized and began to wield power over the dollar bills they earned and spent in the community. There was economic power in numbers, and these ideas were new and powerful back then. I was 17 when the Supreme Court chose love over lineage and granted the Lovings of Virginia and all interracial couples the right to marry. In 1968, I turned 18. Martin Luther King was in Memphis leading a strike of garbage workers. He shared with us his joy at having seen the mountaintop, and then he too was gone. Another assassin's bullet. The country's anguish exploded. More riots. I remember reading that Dr. King said that riots were the evidence of unheard voices. Well, it's been 51 years since Dr. King died, and in those years, I grew to benefit from the pebbled road he traveled and stumbled so that folks like me could glide. In those years, I worked hard, I prospered, I managed a family, and I retired in some complacency. I cried with joy when Barack Obama was elected. Was Martin's dream finally realized? No. Sadly, no. Since the end of Barack Obama's administration, and in recent years, there is simply no denying that progress is slipping. We are sliding quickly backwards. Today, Once again, we are living in a hateful, frightening, ugly time when you don't know how to explain things to your children. We face again battles that I thought we had won long ago. Since our beloved country has been driven to make itself great again, hate crimes have gone up by 17%. Racially or religiously different children are being bullied in schools. Latino American citizens with every right to be in their country are threateningly teased about deportation. Teachers are reporting that they're having difficulty with kids who no longer think it is wrong to bully or belittle someone. And it seems like just last night, I was reading about seeing a viral video where a Native American was being accosted by some nice Catholic boys in red MAGA hats who were emboldened, no doubt, by loose, harmful talk that denigrates anybody who is different. Anti-Semitism is on an unprecedented rise. And while it's true that the N word is no longer used, new words have come to pass. Now we speak of nationalism and the alt-right, and we've given rise to words that have found acceptability. Some people take pride in these labels, untroubled by their association with painful history and racist undertones. Immigrants and non-Christians, especially those who are not white, have much more to fear than others from our country's official actions. We separate children from their parents, and then we lose them when they've only come here to seek asylum and a better life. We seek to build walls instead of bridges. I have lived to see the erosion, again, of voting rights, of racist gerrymandering and blatant voter suppression. And once again, after all these years, I weep for Black and Latino men and occasionally their children, unfairly detained, unreasonably searched, and at worst, sometimes shot down in the street without cause, unarmed, sometimes in their own homes or cars. Black boys walking home from the corner store have been killed. Our children shot because they played music too loud or played in the park with a toy pistol, because they moved too fast or didn't move quickly enough when an official demanded that they do so. When the advent of handheld video has brought into our lives more examples of police overreaction and from time to time, downright brutality, still, there are too few prosecutions. Today, we witness attacks on fundamental bargaining rights for workers under misleading titles like right to work. Almost every day, I listen to the news, and sometimes I despair. Our airwaves poison us with vitriol, the failure of facts, engineered divisiveness, and manufactured fear. Too many have come to mistrust government and our most basic institutions, the press, the FBI, the Supreme Court. I watch the abdication of government responsibility to provide constitutional checks and balances. We all suffer from the pervasiveness of poverty and war in our world. Healthcare is being whittled back or denied to our most vulnerable, and women's rights are once again under attack. I thought these repressive ills were dead, but no, they're back again. And they have grown in sufficient intensity to rock the very foundation of our democracy. I thought that we had overcome, and I thought that I had lived through the worst years of the civil rights movement. I never thought I would again have to fear for my loved ones like my foremothers did. After all these years, do I really have to worry again whether my 7-year-old granddaughter will be safe? Will she have the preventative health care and the coverage for pre-existing conditions? Will her wishes for her own body be supported? Or will her sex and her color be used again by someone to make her feel less than she is? Will the men in my life, my husband, my son, my grandsons, be shot down in the street because someone panicked without reason, or because someone was threatened by their right simply to exist? Dr. King is gone, just when we needed his example, his righteous certainty, his foresight and wisdom. The king is dead, but he left behind his legacy. His words and his deeds live on. I'd like to close by sharing some of my favorite bits of his wisdom. What follows are the words of Dr. King. A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. Men often hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they cannot communicate. They cannot communicate because they are separated. Hatred paralyzes life. Love releases it. Hatred confuses life. Love harmonizes it. Hatred darkens life. Love illuminates it. Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. Law and order exist only for the purpose of establishing justice. When they fail in that purpose, they become dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. There is no deficit in human resources. There is only deficit in human will. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for justice. A man dies when he refuses to take a stand for that which is true. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because one's conscience tells one that that is what is right. Finally, not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great. Because greatness is determined by service. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. And Dr. King had just one final piece of advice that we can all make of humanity. And selflessly, you will make a greater person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in. So we celebrate Dr. King, we thank God for his vision and his mercy, and we pray for a future that will live up to his dream and support us in fulfilling it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. Thank you for those inspiring words, and you are certainly an example for us young Black leaders and for all young leaders. Thank you very much. Before we close with songs from the Hall High School choraleers, we invite you to check out the beautiful artwork and essays on display in the hallways. They are outside these doors and outside these auditorium doors. The artwork and essays are the product of children in West Hartford's public elementary schools, and the children learned about the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as part of their social studies and language art curriculum on famous Americans. The children read about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and studied his well-known speeches, his important contributions to our country, and then wrote essays and poems about his life and created artwork on how King's message relates to their own lives. Please stop by and take a look at this fabulous work after the program. Now, without further ado, please welcome the Hall High School choraleers, led by the choir director, Brett Bowles. The Hall Choraleers is an addition to ensemble that meets both during school and after school. The Choraleers are the featured group in the annual Pops and Jazz Show in the spring, as well as the annual Mardi Gras dinner each fall. We are honored to be here to share the joy of music. Their song selections are Beautiful City by Stephen Schwartz from Godspell and Moses Hogan's arrangement of Abide With Me. The final song will be We Shall Overcome. Be sure to sing along, and the words are on the back of your program, so you can sing along with them. Please welcome the Hall High School choraleers.
Darkness deepens, Lord,
Can we give another round of applause for the Hall High School choraleers, please? Beautiful voices. And as we close today's celebration, we again invite you to check out the portraits and the student artwork in the hallway, and then come back for an interactive discussion. Please take a moment to complete the feedback cards. I think I have one so I can show you. The feedback cards that are in your program. And you may drop the cards into the box on the refreshment table in the back. And please help yourselves to juice, coffee, and pastries, and compliments of Elmwood Senior Center. And let us go on this thought, that we are all united, not simply because we're diverse, but because we are diverse. Let us stand, let us hug one another, shake someone's hand, spread love, and have a happy Martin Luther King Day. Thank you very much.